So there's a lot of, what do I want to call it? Apprehension, tension, especially not just the state of Arizona, but specifically along our southern border. A lot of the communities that border Mexico and that share a lot with Mexico, whether it be economic, cultural, etc., and they're really concerned about what a Trump presidency looks like.
Yeah, and someone who just got back from the border. Our buddy Nick Ciletti, ABC 15, morning anchor. He joins us here in studio. What's up, man?
Great to be with you guys. Appreciate it.
So you went to San Luis, Arizona, a thriving border community, Yuma County. And I love this story, man, because you went and you talked to real people. Because what people are talking about is, okay, this Trump administration, mass deportations, maybe. Tariffs, maybe. How about using the military at the border? Maybe. How about closing the border for a period of time? Maybe. Give us a story of a real person that you spoke with down there, and you were just like, oh, wow, I didn't know that before I got here.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you pointed that out, because that was really my mission by going to San Luis, is to find the real people, because it's so easy to talk to a mayor or this person or that person, but it's the real people where I think you find the impact. There was one person I spoke to. Her name was Angelica, and she's the manager of a store. They sell like kids' backpacks and school supplies and whatnot, some clothing. And I talked to her in February. It was part of our 48 Hours on the Border series we did earlier this year. And I followed up with her just last week. And, she told me about a number of issues they're still having. Wait times at the border. That's always a concern, especially if you're a business owner like her. You want people to be getting across as quickly as possible, right? Because if the wait times are too long, people aren't going to want to come. And, those border towns like San Luis depend so much on people coming from Mexico. I mean, Mexico is Arizona's biggest trading partner. So
by far,
absolutely. And even more so there in places like San Luis and places like Nogales. It is crucial. So she told me they were concerned about wait times, and she's been hearing mixed things about what a second Trump term could look like. For where she comes from, she thinks, a lot of it might just be talk. Some of it might just be threats. We've all heard about the tariffs and using the military at the border, and like you mentioned, possibly shutting it down. She was hopeful that was just talk and maybe is some kind of a bargaining chip, let's say. But she did say that there were other people who she's spoken to, people who have come in the store who have legitimate concerns and are worried that they or maybe their family members could be deported, or that some of these changes could really have a big impact on San Luis and the commerce there.
We're talking to ABC 15's Nick Ciletti, who spent time down in San Luis, just south of Yuma. Might be a good way. Yuma's border city. I guess
there you go.
I always thought Yuma was on the border until I found out about San Luis.
Well, there is part of Yuma, and I think that would be in the city limits where there would be a wall. But yeah, for the most part, there when you're talking about a port of entry,
you're
San
talking
Luis
San Luis.
So like 40,000 people.
Yep, exactly. And 40,000 people, but they have about 2.5 million people who cross every single year, according to the city, which if you break it down is about 7,000 or so a day.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of people.
And I think something people may not be familiar about, and you spent time in Yuma.
Yeah, I lived there for about 2 years.
So you kind of know that. I lived in Tucson, so I know Nogales pretty well. Is the number of people who cross the border on a daily basis for work, school, whatever, legally, by the way, I mean, who just go back and forth across the border, and a shutting down of the border fundamentally changes a lot of people's lives.
Right. I mean, well, we saw it sort of play out this year when the Lukeville port of entry closed. I mean, obviously, there were other ports of entry, other access points for people going back and forth for Mexico. But, I mean, that was a huge impact for people who use that port of entry because they had to take detours and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, if you thought about closing down the entire border, my goodness, what kind of an impact that would have, like you just mentioned, because there are people who live in Mexico but go to school here or work here. I mean, there was a woman I interviewed named B, who is a single mom in Mexico. She works here, crosses every day. She's an agricultural worker. She's here on an H-2A visa, so she's legally here, does seasonal work. She's been doing this for 8 years now, and I mean, that's crucial for her to be able to support her young son.
Well, it's also crucial for the ag industry, I would point out.
Absolutely.
In Yuma and other places specifically who need those workers.
You want to stick around for a quick second?
I'd love to.
Oh, he's been so gracious with his time today. ABC News' Nick Ciletti.
He's got nothing else to do.
He has lots to do.
He's got
He's
nothing going on.
One of the hardest
other than
working
us.
men in
You've
television.
Gotta be kidding me.
Unreal.
Sorry.
To put up with you. I apologize.
No,
ahead of time
hey, I
for
mean,
him.
keep the compliments
I'm
coming, guys.
defending you, Nick. All right? But we do appreciate Nick Ciletti again. ABC 15. You see him every morning, and just recently spent some time down along the border. Talking to people about their concerns. I use the term apprehension because I think I guess since there's a lot of it in our border communities as to what a Trump presidency means for them.
All right, so tell us a story of someone who crosses the border, crosses from Mexico into the U.S. every single day.
Yeah, so I met a couple of folks who were agricultural workers who work in the fields every day, especially now. This is the growing season in Yuma. So you think about the lettuce, the cabbage, all of that. It is the winter vegetable capital of the U.S. So, I mean, there is such a demand for these workers. So one in particular was a guy named Jose, who is the father of two, lives in Mexico, and then crosses every day through the San Luis port of entry, and has been doing that for a number of years. And, you know, he has a visa, so he does it legally. And I asked him, you know, how are you feeling about all of this? And he actually said that he was feeling optimistic, and he was hopeful that there would be some opportunities for people like him in a second Trump presidency. And
because he has legal status to work here.
Exactly, which is a good point of differentiation, because the other worker that I spoke to that we talked about before the break, B, who is here legally, also has an H-2A visa. She said, you know, she feels okay because she is here legally, but she also did feel for the folks who might not be, because they've been doing this for quite a while, and maybe they're not going to be able to support their families anymore, because obviously there's been the talk of the mass deportation. However, she did say that perhaps if there were these mass deportations like President-elect Trump has talked about, that it could actually benefit people like her who are the visa holders, because it might create more work for them if there's less people.
They get more hours.
Exactly.
They're needed more because there are less people.
Right.
The numbers, though, and we were just talking about some of this, and I don't know how you can specifically quantify it, so I'll say that right now. But I've seen numbers that say around 20% of people that work in ag, literally work in the fields, are probably not here illegally. And by the way, I have friends that work in the agriculture world, and they say, that sounds about rightish. You know, you're kind
So
of
you're
in the
talking
ballpark.
about someone who lives in America illegally and works. Got it.
Picking strawberries in Ventura, or what do we call Yuma again?
The winter vegetable capital
The
of the US.
winter vegetable capital.
But what if you get rid of 20% of those workers?
You're not going to have winter vegetables.
No, you're not.
you're gonna run out of that pretty quick. Now, I don't know if that necessarily sways anybody, but there are industries that rely on cross-border, and you talk about, and you were down again. You're in San Luis. You were just down there, just south of Yuma. You go to Nogales. You go to Lukeville. These ports of entry, there are semi-trucks coming across there with stuff that, I say it nicely, that we're obviously buying. I mean, they're not bringing it here to burn it. You know, they're bringing it here to sell stuff. And we rely on that. In Arizona, so much of what you buy in a grocery store or at a shopping center is coming from Mexico. It just is.
Absolutely. And like we said before the break, Mexico is Arizona's largest trading partner by far. I mean, the binational commerce that is happening. I mean, we're talking billions and billions of dollars in products going back and forth.
Correct.
Coming to the U.S., but also going to Mexico every single year from Arizona. So it's a huge impact. And you bring up a good point, too. It's really hard to pinpoint the exact number of workers who may be undocumented doing this, right? Because they're sort of working in the shadows.
Without a doubt.
So it's hard to really quantify, to your point, what the exact impact would be. But, you know, I've seen stories and reports and heard from people nervous about that, of what exactly that would mean if those folks got deported.
You talked to the mayor of Yuma?
I did. I talked to Mayor Doug Nichols, and that story's going to air tomorrow on ABC 15 Mornings.
Okay.
And as I mentioned, I lived in Yuma for about 2 years. and it's a great community. We wanted to follow up with Mayor Nichols. He's someone that I have spoken to a couple times over the past years.
We've got a chance to speak to him on the radio.
Absolutely, and we talked to him. Gosh, the first time I interviewed him was right before Title 42 came to an end in May of 2023. So obviously, we wanted to know how is that going to impact his community. We were there. We saw the long lines of people wanting to cross right before it ended. And just in talking to him, and I asked him, would your city participate in these mass deportations? Would you be okay
Great
with
question.
the Yuma Police Department doing that?
My guess is no.
Well, it was kind of a nuanced answer.
Okay.
And not to give the whole story away
we
tomorrow,
have to watch tomorrow. Yes.
yeah, but you'll see what he says, because he told me that right now, look, if police are playing a support role, that's one thing. However, doing the job of removing people and whatnot is really a federal responsibility. And there's more to the answer too, and we dive deeper into it. But that is something that so many Arizona cities are going to be faced with. I talked to the San Luis Police Department about that. That story is going to air Friday on ABC 15 Mornings.
Oh, wow.
And just talked about what kind of a burden that would be, especially San Luis, city of about 40,000 people.
They can't have that large a police force.
Right. It's a small police force. They don't have a jail. It's just the Yuma County Jail.
Yeah.
So where do you put these people?
So
all these questions.
All these stories in the morning, ABC 15.
Well, tonight, actually, Fort Hatchet has a story with an Arizona rancher. You'll want to tune in at 6 for that. But Patricio Espinosa has a story. Lillian Donahue did a story about tariffs yesterday. You can find all of it on abc15.com as
Awesome.
Oh, he's a company man. Boy, he got that in well, didn't he?
It's our 48 Hours on the Border series.
There
it's
you
important
have
for
it.
us to
Great
follow
series.
up.
Anita will be happy. Okay?
Hope you guys
Outstanding.
are too.
Nick Ciletti, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure to be here. We appreciate it.
Outstanding. Amazing work that he's doing down there along the border, and there'll be a lot more to come.
Thanks for watching Outspoken with Bruce and Gaydos. Tap to watch more from KTAR News and click the button in the middle to subscribe.